Hey, welcome back. Show you the update on the sawmill deck, Norwood HD36v2. We ended up getting Norwood shipped out the sawmill tracks that we were short. We got everything installed, everything trued, everything put together. So the sawmill deck is together. I'm gonna pan it, and we'll go over a couple of things maybe that to help make things easier for you. So from Dave's videos, we'll talk about the first thing right now, and that is truing up these saw tracks. Okay, so from Dave's video, what Dave does is, and Norwood has it in their literature too, is clamping a string over here, sticking a nut underneath like that, running the string down with a nut down the other end, and then checking the track as you go with a nut. Going to give you my opinion on that. The way that we did it was we had to put the nut here. So if you have a 16-foot mill from Norwood, you only have two of these 2-foot sections on one end, and everything else is a 4-footer. These 2-foot sections, because they're held on by this external flange right here, are floppy like this. So you don't know if this end is at the right height to start. So what I would suggest is that you, give me one sec, that you put your nut here at the beginning of the 4-foot track. You can still attach your string down here, that's fine, and run your string over the top of this nut like that. And if it's only a 16-foot mill like you get from the factory, then you can put your nut on the end of the 4-foot track down the other side, because these 4-footers all sit down and all sit flat. This one we had to adjust afterwards with a level, so we had to use a level as a straight edge on here and then adjust this one after these were all straight. So that's number one. Now ours, because it's a 20-footer, we have 2-footers down the other end too. So when you do it, you have to put the nut on the the end of the 4-foot track, and down there at the end of the 4-foot track, not on the 2-foot track, because like I said, these 2-foot tracks do this. And until they're coplanar with this, which this is not coplanar until you string it, that's what I would suggest. So you can still attach it down here, run it over the nut, put a nut on the end of the 4-footer down there, forget these all together and just level these off with a level after the fact. What else did we figure out? So you can't, these end brackets, you have to make sure that you leave these loose until you're pretty trued up, you know, until you get square. Same thing down the other end. The other thing that we ran into was when these are all finger tight, can you get me from this angle? Mm-hmm. When these are all finger tight, you have to understand that as you're finger tightening these nuts on here, okay, these are pretty heavy. And you can only go so far. You're not compressing it together, right? So you're just getting them finger tight, finger tight, finger tight. Well, what happens with these is that they can lean a teeny little bit because of their weight out in. These were both a little bit bowed this way. And what it was the center was just leaning out. So what I had to do, because when I ran my string, the string was in the center of the rail at the beginning, and the string was in the center of the rail at the end, and the rail in the middle was way out here. So you couldn't check it, not way out, but let's say a rail out. You couldn't check it with the nut because the string was way inside. So what we ended up having to do was just tighten a couple of these down that pulled it right in, right under the string, and then we could check it to true this up. So that's another thing that we did run into, was that, you know, this one side, we didn't have that problem really on the other side. We did have to kick it over to straighten it, but as far as it leaning, we didn't run into that problem. We did run into that problem on this side though. So just what we did was we tightened down one of these outside bolts. It sucked the frame in true and put this track right under the string, and then we were able to check it with the string and do it that way. Time-wise, go ahead, what's up?
And there was a point at which, when we pulled it in to get it straight, we ended up having to loosen it up in order to get the track right.
To get the track to fall.
But then we pushed it back in, so
Right.
it was more a matter of you kind of play around with it.
Yeah, so we sucked it in. We tightened that down to suck this in so we could check it. And then when this section of the rail had to drop, so as I'm adjusting the feet down, because you have those two tight, they're resisting the deck, you know, these big rails from dropping. So then we had to loosen them up, and they dropped right down, and then it was perfect, and away we went. But yeah, so it was a little bit fiddly back and forth. These outside, so on this outside right here, these capture a bearing that runs underneath to keep the saw head from pulling up. We clamped every single one. Now, if you can see this, they're kind of flush out here, but in here the radius isn't the same. So, you know, I guess that's the reason why Dave likes to leave his bearings a little bit below that, because you're probably never going to get that perfect.
It's just not machined to that level.
Yeah, exactly. These two, the radius right here in front of my finger and the radius right here on this next one's not the same. So, you know, when they were clamped flush out here, they're nowhere near flush in there. So that bearing's going to ride underneath, and that's why Dave says to leave them low, because I think in the manual it tells you to put them right up against the metal, and if you did that, it would bind right here. Or I could take a hammer and beat it up, you know, something like that. I mean, you could literally take a hammer and beat this till it's level, because this is what's important, that these are flat for the saw head to ride on. These are just a bearing that captures the head from being able to pull off the track upwards. What else did we run into?
Once we did one side, we decided that we would tighten that one side down.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And then we tightened the end caps. We checked for square and tightened both end caps.
Yep.
And then we moved over to the other side and did the same thing with the string on that side, because we wanted to create kind of a reference surface. We already knew that one side was straight and the two ends were square.
Right.
And so we could see easier with the string.
Right, because after we strung that side, if we didn't tighten that side, when we came over here and messed with this side, we'd have messed that side up. So I thought that was we actually made that decision on the fly. We did the string over there and we got that perfect. And then we said, hey, this isn't going to stay perfect if we go over here, especially when everything's finger tight, because you can only get these so finger tight. So we tightened that whole side down, just the bottoms and the side rail, so that would stay in place, and then we tightened the end caps, right, so that we made sure they were both level. We tightened the end caps so that really nothing could move around, and then we did this rail. It's a good point. Just the way it worked for us. I mean, if you're working flat on a concrete floor, it'll be different. But the way that we were working on on the leveling feet, that's the way we had to do it. So I do see one thing that concerns me about the mill, and that is that there's been no attention paid to whether these bunks are coplanar. Now, I eyeballed them last time in one of the other videos and they look good, but I think we should probably check them just to see, because I know that in every sawmill person in the world, they're always messing with their bunks. So they're really close. I mean, is it close enough? And there's really no adjustment here. So you can see that they're level. But that bunk right there is higher than these two. And it's only a teeny bit. It's probably, it's less than a 16, maybe a 16th. So that one is like a little bit high. Now, is some of this gonna crush down? Maybe. There's kind of some bumps on these from when these get tightened, they make a little bump here. So is that gonna be okay? Probably. But if you have one that was way out, and there's nothing in the directions about checking these,
Yeah.
and actually I can't even bridge. Oh, even with an 8-footer, I can't bridge them. So yeah, I mean, that might be something that down the road, if we end up with some weird cuts, that we're gonna have to check with a string probably, or a laser, something to make sure that, you know, how much could these be adjusted? If we loosened off the inside bolts, can you see the bolts here? So if we loosened off these inside bolts, how much slop is in there? I'm not really sure, but now these are attached to the feet too. You know, that would be a pain in the ass if we had to move these up or down. And there's no talk anywhere that I've ever seen about adjusting these. So is it going to be good enough for a sawmill? I'm probably 99% sure it is, but the only one that I can check is not flat. So, you know, I can only check this with an 8-footer, and this one's higher than those two. So not much. Is it enough to make a difference? Probably not. I mean, just that little bit would squish into the wood. If this log was heavy, this, you know, the amount that this is out would squish into the wood, and it would rest there and there. So it's not, you know, from a wood standpoint, it's not too high, but it's not flat. So, you know, are these flat like this? You know, we can, with all our leveling feet, we can level them, which is going to be important. These are going to have to be leveled side to side, so we can get them coplanar that way. Does that mean that if this one's going to come up a lot, that corner is going to be way higher than this one or this one? I don't really know. So it's going to be interesting to find out as we go forward. I mean, everything I've watched on them doesn't seem to be a problem, but I know it's a problem on the woodland mills big time. All the woodland mill guys have to adjust all these. So and they go through hell and high water to do it. I've seen a whole bunch of different processes on, from lasers to strings to you name it, to getting their bunks all perfectly coplanar. And I mean, they go down below a 16th. There's no doubt in my mind right now that these are not within a 16th across this whole deck. They can't be without having been adjusted. So how much slop's there? I'm not really sure. I guess you could almost loosen these and move it that way too, and leave these brackets tight and just do it here. So if you were getting some weird twisted cuts or something like that, it's probably going to be in the bunks. I'm going to hope they're good, because when you put these brackets on, all you're doing is sticking the bolts through the hole and tightening them down, and then sticking them in here and sticking the bolts through and tightening them down. I mean, those are the directions. So there's no adjustment to these anywhere and I know there's no way they're perfect. Now, I showed them last time when we leveled it, and they look really, really good. So it's probably going to be good enough, but it's just going to be something that's stuck in the back of my mind. So other than that, this is where we're at. Log deck's done. We're going to start working on the saw head. Hopefully we're not missing any parts there. If we get some good weather, I think it's going to rain tomorrow, then, you know, we could be ready to cut in a couple of days, or, you know, a couple afternoons of work. I think this took us just to true this and tighten everything down and torque everything. It probably took us over 4 hours. So, you know, that was with a bunch of us doing it. You know, Billy was using the torque wrench as Kate and I were tightening everything else down. So we were tightening going both ways with impact guns, and Billy was following behind us with the torque wrench, torquing everything to 45. So we'll see. But right now we're solid. We got, you know, the log stops in, the dog's in, and this part of the mill is finished, and we're going to move on and saw head. So Thanks for watching. We just want to keep you updated. If you have any questions, shoot us a question. I'll answer you back. And hopefully everybody's New Year's going great. So thanks for the watch.
Have a great day.